You are listening to Sustainability 101, a collaboration between Warin Lab and Green World Foundation. Sustainability 101 brings to you inspiring stories of people on the front line of environmental conservation. This program is part of Warin Lab Contemporary Podcast, a podcast that explores art and sustainability. I am Sukontip Nakasem, and I'm your host.
If I have this sort of loudness to my social media, I could probably use it in the right way, and I could probably use it in a way that can benefit others. Because I just feel that famous actors, they set trends. You're kind of responsible of how you shape the way society thinks.
Alex Rendell is a household name in the Thai entertainment industry. He is an actor and a singer. He started his acting career at the age of 4. His social media platform has over 1.6 million followers. Alex is on the front line of environmental conservation with a razor-sharp focus to educate young people on the value of the environment. Alex co-founded the Environmental Education Center Thailand, or Eecs, to foster environmental consciousness in the younger generation in order to tackle the environmental crisis from the ground up. He introduced immersive learning experience to encourage deeper understanding and appreciation of nature. Alex used his platform to bring environmental conservation and sustainability to the mainstream. In this episode, Vivi Siriporn Aram, Partner Development Director of Green World Foundation, speaks with Alex on his inspiring stories. Here is the conversation. So, Alex, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit who you are and what do you do?
My name is Alex Rendell. I am an actor for Channel 3, and I represent many organizations. And I'm also the United Nations Environmental Program Goodwill Ambassador and also the co-founder of EEC Thailand, which is an organization that aims to educate the next generation of leaders in an attempt to conserve our natural resources, with the belief of having nature as our classroom will motivate the younger crowd to want to protect our natural resources in the long term.
Well, you have been an actor for very young age, and maybe it's not common for the actor to be interested in the environment. In your point of view, what is sustainability and how it's related to the education?
Well, first of all, I agree that it might not be common for an actor to choose this kind of direction, but I think that everyone has their own hobbies and everyone has their own interests outside of acting. And it just happens to be that mine started from not so much environmental conservation, but more like being a volunteer and helping out to anything that had to do with nature. And from that, I started to understand what really conservation was all about. And conservation then led to sustainability. And I found out later on in my environmental career, I guess, that sustainability is a much wider point than it is in comparison with conservation. I was privileged enough to talk to one of the CEOs of a company doing sustainability, and they said to me that sustainability comes from two words, which is sustain and ability. So finding the ability to be able to sustain, and the word sustain is being able to make something last for as long as possible. It's not just about nature, it's not just about our environment, but it also has to do with many different aspects, which I later on learned about the SDG goals, the 17 SDG goals from the United Nations. And I think that those 17 goals are a good start and a great way to understand what exactly sustainability is, because it touches not only, like I said earlier, not only nature, but it's talking about people, well-being of people, the health of people, future solutions, whether it's renewable energy or sustainable consumption and production. So sustainability for me is just being able to keep something for as long as possible and make sure it doesn't run out, to prevent any chaotic future events, which we are already going through in many parts of the world. So my job basically is to sustain as many things as possible using education and focusing on Thailand.
So education is in one of the SDG goal, right? Number 4.
Right.
So you established EEC
5 years ago. So
Yeah.
could you share your journey, your story, why you use EEC as the central?
I started from donations to save a wild elephant. That was the very beginning. I mean, I started many, many years ago. When I was a child, I was always someone that liked nature. When I finished university, I felt like I wanted to do something along the lines of nature. Didn't quite know what it was until I started doing conservation. And then I started to meet a lot of professors, a lot of researchers. I found out that out of all the different directions or all the approaches you can take, I felt that education, first of all, was the lightest way to do it. It was something that not many people would disagree. Education is like building a foundation, like all problems, not only to do with conservation, but all problems in general. Having a quality education can eventually solve many, many problems. And the more you go forward, the more you explore and the more you travel with that mindset, you start to realize that actually all these problems that we see around, if there was education implemented in some sort of way, it could maybe not solve it, but maybe make the problem a little easier to solve. So I always felt that education was something that I strongly believed in. I mean, education is not only about bringing people into classroom and books and exams. That's actually completely different to the education that I see. I just feel that everything is about education. Exploring is education. Traveling is educating. Like I was an actor since I was 4 years old. I was educated along the way. For me to be able to travel and see the country, see different sorts of people was educating myself, building my inner character to be as strong as possible. So I just felt that all these aspects could be implemented into environment. And I felt that as an actor myself, I had the ability to educate others and inspire others. I would be lying if I said that I had all the knowledge in the world with everything that I'm doing, because I'm still learning as I go along. But my job is really not to become a researcher or an expert in any way. My job is to be able to work with researchers and experts and bring their great information and educate others in a way that it's easy to understand. I really think that environmental education is a model that could be replicated around the world as well. And I just hope that what we're doing will eventually do that sometime down the line. Using my social media, like I have quite a bit following on my Instagram page. I see that other environmental pages their followers may not match to the amount of my followers. So I felt that, okay, if I have this sort of loudness to my social media, I could probably use it in the right way. And I could probably use it in a way that can benefit others. Because I just feel that famous actors, they set trends. So you're kind of responsible of how you shape the way society thinks.
For sure, you are the trendsetter for advocating the environmental issue to reach the more general public audience. And I really like when you mentioned about the sustainability is the ability to sustain everything surround you or even within you. So when you take the student to learn in your camps, what that you saw and witnessed that is like, oh, if we do not do something, this thing will disappear and will nothing left to see in the near future. Could you share those experience with us?
If we were to not mention the students, like just myself personally, I just feel that a lot of the environmental problems were problems that have been building up for many, many years. And science has recently revealed that it's a problem. And now we're trying to solve a problem that has a very strong foundation. For example, like when you go down south, people are living along the coast and then there's different laws. People depend on nature and all of a sudden we want to conserve nature. And then now there's a conflict between the people living within the area. You understand both sides. You understand why there's a problem and why there's a disagreement right there. Every time I just feel like there's so many stakeholders involved in conservation, especially for our oceans. And I just think that management is a very key aspect of conserving certain areas. And I think that a lot of the environmental problems that we have right now, you're stuck in a situation where you have to choose between nature and people, especially with the population growing and the demand of people who are using our natural resources. Like, how do you find a balance between that? Like, an example would be like, okay, climate change, the ice is melting, the ocean are rising every day, causing us to lose land everywhere in the country due to erosion. Of course, you're not going to want to lose land because there's many business, many development going on in that land. So you have to build something to stop that erosion from happening, to save people. But at the end of the day, biodiversity levels are threatened with construction in the ocean. So it's like, what do you choose? Do you choose the development of the country that affects the economy, or do you choose the biodiversity levels of the ocean. Of course, I'm going to say biodiversity because we're nature people. We work for this. But if you look at it in a third person point of view, you kind of see like, how are they going to solve this? How is this going to end? And it can only get worse because the world is changing so fast. And it's changing at a rapid rate that it's almost uncontrollable, and like great action needs to be taken right now. And a lot of the times when many big characters are involved, it becomes personal. It becomes a conflict between people, and then it delays the whole process. So two people disagree. It actually is delaying the time where we could save that environmental issue, and the impact just gets bad. And, like everything has to go through a process. Everything is quite bureaucratic in certain ways. So there's all these different projects. And this comes from being able to work with foundations, being able to work with national parks. I've been lucky enough to see conservation on many different levels, like all the way to a global level with environmental leaders from around the world, abroad and stuff like that. So I really see the difference in the conflicts, in the problems that I see. And it all comes back to the way that people think. It all leads back to education, in my perspective.
For sure, there's a lot of conflict going on. And like when we are as a nature people, the development people will see like, yeah, you are the blockage for any development, right? So it's a hard call. And normally the nature people, we are much more small percentage compared to the development people. So they said sustainable development is actually based on three things: economic development, social development, and environmental thing. And through your work with EEC, you have led more than 100 camps or something like that.
Over 200 now. It's quite a lot. It's quite a lot.
I think like for the audience would be interesting if you could give an example, what happening in one camp, what did you teach the new generation, what did they learn, and how they can integrate to their soul, who they are with nature.
So our idea is be able to increase value of nature to our students. 90% of our students go to international schools. So of course they come from great backgrounds. They come from great families. The groups that we get are all like sons and daughters of CEOs, of managers, of leaders, basically in their own way. So these kids also have that path. They go to international schools. They're going to be management the next time we know it. They're going to probably go back and take over and do whether it's their own business, start their own business. That's their career path that we're quite aware. Myself, I went to an international school, so I'm quite aware with how international students go about in their lives. But on these camps lately, we're trying to implement the SDG goals to align with EEC. Actually, EEC goals to align with the SDG goals. I try to bring the sustainable development goals and implement it in a way that it could help the students. No matter what they do in their lives, no matter where they go or what they do, they have that environmental love within them. So they're going to the beaches with their family and just seeing the nice side of it. But then when we take them down, we're telling them that, hey, these are the problems. Climate change is happening. It's affecting life below water. It's affecting life on land. If our ocean dies, if our reef dies by 2050, as experts say, because of the change in temperatures, it will definitely affect our economy. It will affect sustainable communities. It will affect pretty much everything. Our job is basically to open their eyes up. The activities are just basically snorkeling, learning about the corals, learning about the fish. The next day we take them out to the ocean. They go diving. They come up, we talk to them. They have to know what they're seeing. They have to know the biodiversity levels. They're not coming as tourists. They're not coming as travelers, but they're actually come to study, to understand what is actually under there and how everything works, the ecology within the area, all these different aspects that we try to teach, the importance that the oceans have with the local people. And if any bad decisions are made, it's the local people that will be affected in the end. So these are the things we're trying to show them. And on the last day, we get the SDG goals, we bring them out. I give them like a couple rocks each, and then I say, okay, what are these 17 goals? And I say, okay, if our ocean dies right now, which one will it affect? And then they put their rocks on the different SDGs. And then we come back and we look at them and then we realize like, hey, actually, the ocean is actually much more important than what we may see. And then we start to ask for them, like, what is your solution? What do you see? From this camp, it inspires, it educates one to be able to pursue their dreams in a way that they could make a change to make it more sustainable. Like, we're not asking them to become environmental leaders or marine biologists. I mean, if they do, then that's great. We would love to. But the long goal is just build them up and shape them up to become responsible leaders. What we're doing is basically inspiring young children. We're all in a position right now where we're trying to tell adults, tell people to think about the world, think about what you're doing. And it's so difficult because they've been living for 30 years. They have personal experience, they have personal perceptions. It's very different to change the way that they think. But students, on the other hand, their learning abilities, their experience, they're more open-minded and more, I guess I would say, easier to influence into doing the right thing. Our job is basically to bring our nature classroom and implement that into them to make them strong enough and become leaders that represent our sustainable goals, and hope we reach all the goals by whenever we need to.
I think many people not know all the 17 goals in details. And I really like when you point out that you don't have to be conservationist to do something for the nature and for our future. So what would be your suggestion for any of us if we want to get familiar with the Sustainable Development Goal? Like, where do we learn about this?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked this question a lot when I go to like university students and talk to them. Like, there's a small percentage that when they listen to us, they feel like they want to do something like that, but they don't have the knowledge. And they always ask, when you have that panels at the end for question times, there's always that question where like, where do I start? And I always tell them to go back to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and study each one of them very briefly. And I think that's a good start to ask yourself, like, where your passion is, which one clicks. Some of them can be like gender equalities, reduce inequalities. It might not have to do with the environment, but like, which one is it? And once you found your step one, then it's easier to find step two, step three. There's a lot of people that want to work here, but there's no direction. Personally, I just feel like go one direction. Don't waste time on doing something you're not good at. Stop trying to improve things that you're not good at and just go good at what you're good at and be the best at what you're at. That's my direction. That's how I manage my staff. That's what I always tell them, that the SDGs is pretty much the United Nations bringing every problem there is in the world, putting it in one basket and dividing it into 17 different goals. I can't think of any other problem that are not in that 17 goals. So I just think that those 17 goals is a great step one if you're considering this career path or this direction.
Well, that's it. The more you know, the more you have the awareness, right? But how would we react or avoid or manage if we know so much? It could feel depressing. So we could have like, so many problems is too much for me. So maybe I don't do anything because it's too challenging. So what would be your recommendation, suggestion to overcome this?
I mean, I think it really depends on the individual. Like for me, I always enjoy the light approach. I'm not really the kind that would be on social media and disregard anyone's work. I'm not in the position to be able to judge others. I don't think so. A lot of times, like I've seen people dedicate their lives for 20, 30 years on one specific topic. And the same goes to another individual working on the same thing, but they have two completely different perspectives. Personally, I just feel that the way that I want to do it, I want to make it in a way that can connect to people as much as possible, in a way that it's fun, in a way that it's easy, in a way that it's entertaining. I'm also an entertainer. So I'm trying to build my two worlds as an actor and as an environmentalist, and combining them and trying to use my experience as an actor to raise awareness for conservation, which is done through like YouTube channels, making it very light. The mass audience don't want to think too hard. So we're going to have to try be as light as possible. I just try to inspire people. I mean, I'm an actor and people perceive me as an actor more than an environmentalist, of course. So I'm trying to use that. And I just think that every content that I could produce, it could be light, it could be easy. Because if you were to be in this industry with a negative mindset, I think you're in for a very stressful, long career, So I'm trying to like tell people like to be positive about it. There are certain things that you cannot change, but you can change yourself, right? You can change the people around you. And I think that's the approach that I'd rather go. I just always tell the kids, like, be positive, be open-minded, learn people, understand people. Like that's the number one thing. It's all about people in the end of the day. Nature is not the difficult part. It's the people you're dealing with that's going to be challenging. So the more you know about people, the more you understand them as a person and you try work around it without causing conflict for them. Because if you cause conflict from them, you're going to cause conflict from yourself and you're going to start your own cycle. And at the end of the day, like you said, you're going to be depressed. SDG, good health and well-being. If you want to help others, you have to help yourself first. So be happy, enjoy, and try not to cause enemies.
So I like the approach. It's like you can't change the society, but you can change yourself. And if you can change your family, your friends who surround you, it could create the snowball effect. Tell us about one of the campaign that you organized in the past year. It's called in Thai, Gott Pa Gott Thale. Maybe you have the English translation for that. Right. You have engaged large-scale event to educate people about the nature. Right. Could you share what is it about? What you learned from that activity?
Okay, so Gott Pa Gott Thale was, it translates directly as hug the forest, hug the ocean. We got together with the team and then we felt like we wanted to do some sort of campaign because we've been educating young children from Bangkok for very, very long. And of course, they're going to become leaders. But at the same time, there are local students, local kids within the area that we would like to educate them, but we had no opportunity to do so. And we just felt that we take kids for 3 days, 2 nights, 4 days, 3 nights, and then we leave. But the people within the area, those are their homes. They wake up to these oceans. They would receive direct impact if their oceans were to slowly die out. So we felt that we wanted to come up with some sort of environmental education process that can educate the local people within the area. And I used to go on these concerts. It was called TV Sam Sanjon. As an actor for Channel 3, I would have to go sing to promote my series and kind of travel around the country. That's when I really started to travel. Like I used to go for maybe 2 or 3 years. I went at least every other month. So I was going to 6, 7 different provinces a year. And it was basically a stage and all the local people gathered together. We sing, we entertain, and then we leave. And I just felt like, hey, that's a pretty cool model if we could have that sort of stage, but talk about the environment and have the audience as kids. So we came up with this project, Gott Pa Gott Thale. We managed to find sponsors. We managed to find people to help us fund. Our first was in Krabi, south of Thailand. We managed to get with the local authorities and they liked the idea. So we managed to get 11 out of 13 schools within Krabi. We managed to get them into a big hall room. We had like 1,000 kids in the morning, 1,000 kids at night. I came up to sing a couple songs and educate them about the Ramsar site in Krabi, how important the mangroves there are in the area, like the biodiversity is in the area. How can you help? I spoke about Mariam, our sea cow, the dugong that was actually found in Krabi and then transported to Trang. These students, they're there, but sometimes there's no one to tell them how important their homes are, not just for them, but for the rest of the country, for the rest of the world. So our idea was to get on stage, get a crowd, educate them using education and entertainment approach, and make it fun and inspire them. And hopefully at least like 5% of them came out with, I want to do something about this. And then we did that. And then the second day we went to Koh Tam, which was a local island in Krabi, into a local school with local children which live on islands, born and bred on that island. And then the last day, we got all other organizations, such as those who work in the hotel network, those who work in the foundations within the area, got them to recruit people. And then we had like a trash cleaning day, which we wanted to tell them that hey, before we clean the trash, we have to learn about it. So we had one rule concept, so understand before you pick up the trash. So our plan was to do that for all around the country, go north, go south, northeast, northwest, everywhere in all provinces in Bangkok. But then the COVID hit, so we couldn't get a crowd anymore. So then we changed that whole direction into an online docuseries. We traveled to all these different provinces. We did one season last season. And this year's season is actually, we just released the first episode. And this year, we're raising awareness on the triple planetary crisis from the United Nations, which is pollution, biodiversity, and climate change. So basically, we went into different areas like forest fires, where people have been heavily affected by the change in climate, those kind of stuff. And we're trying to tell the story and also go to local schools within the area to educate them. So it's the same concept, same idea, just had to change with the pandemic. But hopefully by the end of this year, we could go back to the first approach and do it in big, large crowds, because I'm all about meeting people. I like to see their eyes. I like to see their impressions, and doing stuff online. It just feels that sometimes it's driven more by entertainment than by purpose.
Yeah, we hope that this pandemic will end soon. And I think you give very, very good insight about how to be positive and make the learning fun and entertaining. So if we want to feel the joy of appreciating what we have left in the nature, could you share your experience as you started the EEC in Thailand first and you have been traveled to many places? What is the place and the moment that stay in your heart when you go to the nature? Can you give some example of your experience that you feel like, wow, so amazing. I want the next generation to still witness this.
I mean, it changes every time I go somewhere. And sometimes I've been to that same place, but I go back and it looks different. And I realize that actually the only thing that Thailand doesn't have is like deserts and snow. Everything else that we travel around the world to go see, we actually have it here in Thailand in our own way. We have everything. But the point is that at this specific time right now, I would have to give it to Maya Bay. And the reason is because PP was the first time I ever went snorkeling in the Andaman Ocean, or actually, I'm not sure, maybe in the ocean at all. And that was when I was 10 years old. And I remember so clearly that it was a family holiday. We took the ferry and we were on a boat, and then we took a long-tail boat, and then we jumped in, and then all these fishes were surrounded. And it always stuck as the best family holiday. It always stuck with me, that. And when I started diving, I came back to PP and I felt like this doesn't look like what I remembered. I mean, I've been diving in the area, you see marine life, of course, but like on land, underwater, I say it was disappointing because I envisioned it to be, wow, this very beautiful place. You see it in pictures, but when you actually go there and it's so crowded, there's so many people, it's almost like a land where people go and party and have holidays and stuff like that. So I always kind of stayed away from PP throughout EEC. And then during the pandemic, I went to PP for the first time and my perspective completely changed. Like you see areas where it didn't have corals, they're slowly forming hundreds and hundreds of meters of newly born corals, attracting all the marine life. And now the whole change in the Maya Bay with the whole rules on time control, you can only be there for 1 hour. They built a new port at the back, a proper boardwalk. You're not allowed to leave the boardwalk. And going there, just seeing how beautiful that area was. It was just like the first time, like I hope I'm not stepping on anyone's foot right now, but it just felt like the first time that there was a proper environmental management scheme. There was a proper capacity control. There was a proper way that brought nature instead of revenue, I guess. I just felt like, wow, there's hope. We've heard stories about capacity controls and all these places around the world that have all these sets of rules that if you want to go there, you have to do this, this, and that. Like Sipadan would be an example. Like to take photos there, you have to be a certified photographer underwater because they don't want you to ruin their corals. If you're on a 4-day trip, you can only actually go in the national park for 1 day. Like all those rules, all those control that they had, I always never thought that. I just didn't think Thailand would be the country that would see that importance. But now, hopefully, Maya Bay is the beginning of a good example. It represents the rehabilitation of biodiversity. The sharks are back. It represents how beautiful our country is. It represents how management can make a difference. Nature has come back, and PP is right in the middle of Phuket and Krabi, our two most famous beach tourist destinations. And right now on PP, there's only one mangrove, and that is the beginning of life. Like to me, PP just seems like the beginning of everything in our Andaman Ocean. Personally, that's how I feel. At this moment, just simply because of that change, I really hope that it lasts for as long as possible, and really congratulate and really admire all the effort that was involved and all the thought that they wanted to change that during the pandemic and use that as an opportunity to sustain Maya Bay and PP Islands in the long term.
Wow, you make me feel like there's some hope that can be scaled up.
Hopefully there's hope.
Well, United Nations just declared that this decade is a decade for ecosystem restoration and that we are the generation restoration. So the experience that you have shared shed some light and positivity. So I have some last question as you're an actor. What would be the documentary that you would suggest to your friend who may be not aware much about the environment to watch?
Chasing Coral. I would say Chasing Coral. The stories of the people there are inspiring. And I think that it's a documentary that is based on proper scientific research coming from scientists rather than trying to dramatize everything and give out mixed messages. entertaining people, because that happens a lot in environmental documentaries. I just feel that those are filmmakers, movie makers making a documentary on nature, but Chasing Coral feels like it comes from nature people making a documentary. So that Chasing Coral, there's emotion in it, there's facts, there's great footage. It's very inspiring and very sentimental and very emotional watching that documentary.
There are many ways to start learning about sustainability and how we can contribute to the communities we are living in. The world is our biggest classroom to explore, and environmental education is the building block we need in order to live sustainably.